moment of knowledge, this awakening, it's a good in itself. It doesn't have to be instrumental. So, these goods, what are they? Knowledge. Think of play. Play is a good in itself. I mean, there's so much play that we do so that we can get in shape. But just look at 4 men on a golf course. They love the play of it. Play is a good in itself. Aesthetics. Something is beautiful simply to look at or to hear. Friendship. If you have a friend and he's instrumentally your friend, you don't have a friendship. If you have a friendship so that he can introduce you to a good partner in a downtown law firm, then he's not a friend. He's a contact. A friend, as Aristotle said, a friendship is when you seek the good of the other person. Spirituality. Now, spirituality is seeking the meaning of why we exist. What's the order of the universe? It can lead you to God. God is an option. That's why I say natural law can lead you to God. But it doesn't have to. But everyone knows that reflecting on the deeper meaning of human existence and on the deeper meaning of everything in the universe is a good in itself. It's not going to do you any good to know that there are quarks up there, except for a real physicist. But it's a good in itself to know what the meaning is. Each of the, and lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is craft. To do something, the Greeks really had this one down. To do something well. What a pleasure that is. To ski that slope and curve. I still ski, I don't do that on the board thing, whatever you call it. And to carve that thing just right. What good does it do? I mean, instrumental, nothing. To write a brief for moot court, and just you finish and you look at it and say, boy, this thing really hangs together well. Craft. Last summer I sweated a joint down the basement and I finally got it not to leak plumbing. I really felt good about that. Craft. Now each of these goods are goods in themselves, not mere instrumental goods. We're in the world of natural law, of course. This is what natural law is about. Sometimes we can do things for both things. I can listen to Mozart's Jupiter Symphony because of its beauty, pure and simple, or I can listen to it to prepare for my music appreciation exam. Now the key to modern natural law theory is that each person participates in these fundamental, irreducible goods in a radically individualistic way. When you have an experience of knowledge, it's different from everyone else's. When you have an experience of beauty, it's different from everyone else's. It's yours, uniquely yours. That mixture of goods that create your life cannot and will not be replicated by any other person at any other time for all time. That is your radical individuality. And no other theory than natural law can find the basis of radical individuality as strongly as this. In a society that's based on natural law, we are confronted more with a choice among goods and not simply choices between good and evil. This leads us to our first and greatest principle based on natural law. A society based on natural law must be a free society. We need the opportunities and capacities to engage in the living of these goods. That is to say, we require a set of fundamental legal rights. By anchoring these rights not in what I want to do, but in what I want to experience as a fundamental good, by anchoring these rights in the matrix of fundamental goods of the human person, they become indefeasible and inalienable, just as the Declaration of Independence said. The Declaration of Independence phrasing is a perfect natural law summary of these fundamental goods, including the pursuit of happiness. Why? Because when you experience these goods in themselves, there's a sense of human flourishing and happiness that satisfaction of appetite and pleasures never brings. You all know that. You all, I mean, reflect on that. You know it. The problem with appetite is, the lusts and the hungers and so forth, is that all our appetite impulses are designed to self-destruct. You're no longer hungry, hopefully, right? You were hungry, but no longer. It's just self-destructive. Sexual lust, completion, and so forth. And the very definition of addiction is a person imprisoned in his desires, that he can't get them to self-destruct. He's got to have that, look for that high with cocaine again. It's always over the hill, over the hill. On the other hand, if rationally thinking of the goods in society, of the goods in your human life, if you achieve any of these goods, how happy are you? How happy are you when you're with a good friend? Just the presence of a friend. How happy are you when you finally learn something? Just to have learned it. So as Aristotle said, the pursuit of happiness is in the pursuit of these human goods, these morally freighted human goods. And that's the fundamental matrix of natural law.
Well, I want to start by thanking both the Federalist Society for hosting this wonderful event and Professor Forte for being with us today. I had no idea, I must confess, at the time that I accepted the Federalist Society's kind invitation that so many of our students were fascinated with natural law. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact that my favorite restaurant was serving the food today. You know, I have to say, although this is styled as a debate, there is much of what Professor Forte says that I take no issue with. I certainly agree with the idea that there are some things that are goods in themselves, and I agree with several of the things that he mentioned, including the pursuit of knowledge, the writing of a good brief, and hitting a wonderful shot in golf. Those of you who have had the misfortune of playing golf with me know that for myself at least, this is uncommonly rare and therefore part of the joy that I experience when it happens. I also agree that, as I think I got this right, a society based on natural law must be a free society. Well, putting aside the question of whether I'm someone who believes in natural law, I do think that he has expressed the reason why freedom is vital. We ought to be able to pursue our own vision of the good, our own vision of human flourishing, to, as our Declaration of Independence says, pursue happiness. Where I suppose I differ, or may differ, or at least think that natural law as a theory has its limits, is that I'm skeptical of how helpful natural law is in terms of making or interpreting the law that you study in law school and that I study as a law professor and that you will be interpreting and arguing about when you become lawyers. Especially so when it comes to my main area of inquiry, and that is constitutional law. So in the few minutes that I have, what I'd like to do is briefly address the relationship between morality, law, and I'm going to focus on constitutional law, and politics. Some people will tell you that law is just politics by another name. This is a conclusion that many of us, including myself, resist. We would, at least ideally, like the law, and especially constitutional law, to be something more than politics. And here's the problem. In interpreting open-ended provisions of the the Constitution, such as, for example, equal protection, due process, judges may invariably, or maybe and perhaps invariably are, influenced by their own moral and political views. Take, for example, things like abortion, gay marriage, racial justice, even things like campaign finance. Now, in a sense, for judges to do this, to be guided by their own moral and political views in interpreting the Constitution, is anti-democratic. Our Constitution, after all, vests power in we the people. We the people are the ones who created the government and whom our government is supposed to serve. And so judicial review of laws that are enacted by a majority is, in some sense, anti-democratic. It frustrates the will of the majority. So what is then the justification for these unelected judges intervening? One way of looking at this, how a legal realist or a crit might look at it, is what gives them the authority to impose their own moral and political views on the rest of us? Well, if that's the question, the answer is obvious. Nothing gives them that right. So we have to have some other justification for judicial reviews of laws that are enacted by democratic bodies. Some possible candidates. One, textualism, right? We could look to the text of the Constitution, but this has its limits because words, open-ended words like equal protection and due process, don't interpret themselves. Second candidate, originalism. We could look to the original intent of the founders or the ratifiers or the people who lived at the time that the Constitution and its amendments were enacted. But this has both practical and conceptual problems. Practically, we can't get into those people's minds. And even if we could, we might discover that they had differing views. Conceptually, even if we could get into their minds, and if we found that they were of the same mind, counter to what we know to be, in some cases, the reality, why should we today be bound by the views of people who lived a long time ago? Now, another theory, and the third one that I want to talk about, the one that is most relevant to the subject today, is that we could fall back on some theory of natural law or natural rights as the basis for interpreting the Constitution. Now, this is something that I personally believe to be both wrong and perhaps even in some cases at least dangerous. Now, we've all heard the words from our Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Notice that Jefferson left out women. All men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I suspect that most of us would agree with most of this. Some of us may or may not believe in a Creator. But we believe that there are some inalienable rights. The trouble is that we are not likely to agree on what exactly those rights are, at least on the most significant issues of our day. The devil, at least when it comes to constitutional law, is in the details. How do we figure out what the natural law is? It is not as though any of us have as far as I know, a direct line to the Creator, if we believe in one. We all, I suspect, have our moral beliefs stemming from religion or perhaps from something else. But we don't have agreement on the most important issues of our day, on things like abortion, gay rights, and so on.